On Wednesdays here in our last hour of the Washington Journal, we take a look at recent magazine articles, our Spotlight on Magazine series. Today we're focusing on a Mother Jones piece written by Andy Kroll, who's here with us. And Andy, the headline of your piece is Revealed, the massive new liberal plan to remake American politics. What's this massive new liberal plan? How did it come about?
So the leaders of four of the largest organizations on the liberal side, Greenpeace, the Sierra Club, the Communication Workers of America Union, and then the head of the NAACP, were basically getting together as leaders of liberal organizations apparently do. They joke that they have a knitting club, but not exactly true. But getting together and talking about the problems that they were seeing here in Washington, the problems that they were seeing in politics, preventing them from essentially doing what their organizations were created to do, whether that's environmental protection, whether that's rights and economic prosperity for African Americans, and so on. And they realized we could really do a lot if we got all of our friends and allies together. If we could get our friends and allies to sort of harness the manpower we have, the expertise in various fields that we have, and the money, frankly, that we have from members or fundraising or whatever. And so last June, they got a small group of liberal organizations together and started talking about ways to collaborate and really trying to find common ground, issues to rally around. And then my piece, sort of the jumping point for that, was a meeting that they had in December here in Washington at the National Education Association, the big union building by the White House, talking about raising money and getting manpower and really building an action plan, making an action plan around three issues. The first one is getting big money out of politics, the super PACs, the secretive nonprofit groups. The second one was voting rights and voting ID laws we've heard a lot about. And then the third was reforming how the filibuster is used in the Senate. They see the filibuster essentially as an impediment to the policies that they want, and they believe that they really can't get anything major done on a progressive agenda with the filibuster being used as much as it is in the Senate.
You call it a secret meeting. Why was it secret?
No one was told about it that wasn't invited. No press were allowed. It was off the record, invite only, absolutely. And it was held in a first floor conference room at the NEA building, and really wasn't intended for anybody who wasn't supposed to be there, and it was supposed to be sort of not publicized at all, and I don't know if they were totally happy with me publicizing it, but they spoke to me, so that was nice. Well,
was there representation from the Obama administration, from the Democratic leadership in the House or the Senate?
It doesn't appear to be. When I interviewed these folks, they said that there were no liaisons to the administration. There were no Democratic Party, Democratic National Committee officials there sort of representing that viewpoint. There were two senators, but they came to speak about filibuster reform. That was Senator Tom Udall of New Mexico and Senator Jeff Merkley of Oregon. But really, it was more further to the left in the progressive side, and really it was the advocacy organizations, the interest groups on the left, and representing a diverse array at this summer meeting. I mean, environmentalists, voting rights advocates, campaign finance reformers, immigration reformers, folks who are watchdogs of the right, People for the American Way, for instance. I mean, it was just a panoply of liberal groups here.
So you said that they came to address the problems that they see in American politics. Are the problems that they see with conservatives, with the president, with Democrats, or both?
Well, the problems that they see definitely have to do with conservatives, in that they believe these organizations all have their own specific agendas, and they've kind of been siloed off for a long time as they work on these issues. There's a great line that progressives use, which is stay in your lane. I'll work on my stuff, you work on yours. But what they've come to realize is that these three issues, filibuster reform, money in politics, and voting rights, are fundamental impediments to them getting done what they need to get done. That they can't get environmental legislation passed, that they can't get a big American Jobs Act type bill passed with the filibuster in place. And so they're coming together and saying, hey, this might not be exactly what my constituents want, my members, my board of directors, but it's underlying everything that we do, and we have to do something about it. The Obama administration, I think, as well, and especially their approach to money in politics, is not something that this coalition is lost upon them. I mean, they saw the Obama administration raise more than $1 billion, embrace the use of a super PAC supporting them. The Obama administration, in the reformers' eyes, was not great on that issue, at least, and they're eyes wide open on that.
Well, they're complaining about money in politics, big money in politics, yet they're going to respond by putting in money.
That's absolutely right, and it's one of the sort of inherent tensions of this very effort. But I mean, their point is that, you know, we can't get anything done just by sitting around and talking about it, and just by you know, good ideas and goodwill and press releases. That it does take real money to enact, for instance, limits on money in politics.
So filibuster reform, because we've seen some commercials already advocating for reform of how the Senate works. How much money, how many resources are they putting into that effort alone?
Well, for instance, just yesterday, the Communication Workers of America Union announced $300,000 on ads between now and really in the next week, hammering the Senate, and especially hammering Senate Republicans on the filibuster reform and demanding more rigorous filibuster reform than even the kind Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, is proposing. I mean, that the filibuster reform effort easily is more than $1 million, millions of dollars, if this one ad buy is just 300 in a week.
This is the front page of USA Today this morning about Obama pressing broad gun plans. And in it, Vice President Joe Biden apparently told some Democrats that Organizing for America, the political group that mobilized supporters for the 2009 stimulus plan and for Obama's health care law, would be used to sell the plan to Americans on gun control. Who is this group? How do they differ from the groups that you're talking about? Or are they all part of it?
Organizing for America is definitely an Obama creation. I mean, this is sort of the grassroots network, the email list, the fundraising machine that the Obama campaign, Obama land, if you will, has built up basically since 2007, 2008. Now, Organizing for America is tapped into a lot of the same networks as this organization that I write about, but really OFA, as some folks call it, you know, post-election, it's just the incredible network that the Obama administration / campaign has built up, and they're going to use it to try to get that outside pressure to shape how the debate works here.
Okay, so those liberal groups that met together that you write about here, do they have a new name?
The Democracy Initiative is what they're calling this coalition. I mean, it really doesn't get more anodyne or sort of generic than that, but they fundamentally believe, as they stress to me in interview after interview, that they do not think democracy, small d democracy, is working, that they believe that filibuster and super PACs and you know, $10 million donations to shape legislative races is how democracy should be working and how the founders envisioned it, and that these three items at the core of their agenda are the way to get democracy working again. Reveals
the massive new liberal plan to remake American politics is the headline of the Mother Jones piece that we're focusing on here today as part of our Spotlight on Magazine series. Last week we talked to the reporter for the Washington reporter for National Review magazine about what's happening sort of inside the Republican Party and Republican leaders. This week, Andy Kroll of Mother Jones to talk about the Democrats and their agenda. Veronica in New York, Democratic caller. You up first, Veronica. Hi.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for taking my call. I just want to say I'm a very proud Democrat, and the reason that I am is because I feel that what the Democratic Party does is they try to listen to the people, and they try to, it seems like the Republicans do not care what the American people want, no matter how much that we want certain controls and we want the health care, and that's all for the good of the people. They're totally against it. And then they throw up the Second Amendment on the gun control, which back when that was done, our founding fathers had no idea of the weapons that we're talking about today. I mean, it's outrageous.
Okay, Veronica, Andy Kroll, what did you make of what we heard there from her Democratic caller?
Yeah, well, I think one point that, the caller brings up that was interesting, and that I actually sort of heard doing interviews for this, is that there will be an effort among members of this group to cast Republicans here as detached from the people that they represent. One particular member comes to mind, and that's Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell. organizations in this group. He was one of the few lawmakers singled out by name, according to some notes of this meeting that someone gave me, as someone that this big coalition could and should target in 2013 and especially 2014 when he's up for re-election. They believe that McConnell here in Washington has grown detached from what the people of Kentucky, his home state, want. That he supports really deregulating how money comes into our politics, getting rid of contribution limits and letting people give big amounts of money directly to candidates. And that doesn't poll all that well in Kentucky. And you will see, if the folks in this coalition follow through on sort of the ideas that they have, you will see efforts to drive a wedge between Mitch McConnell and his constituents back home, especially on this issue of money in politics. And that's just one snapshot of what this coalition could be doing in terms of looking at specific lawmakers and taking action around them.
All right, we'll go to Gary next, Walnut Hill, Illinois, Republican caller. Hi, Gary.
Yes, good morning.
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 I don't know why that they have to spend so much money and make a mountain out of a molehill when if they would have put guards in our schools like they do in the banks and the train stations and places like that, if they put guards in our school, qualify the superintendent and the principal, and take them, put them through training, police officer training, and let them become, part of the police officers, we would not have had no more shootings after Combine because they would have stopped that boy before he got into the school. The guard would have seen him and stopped, and there would have never been nobody got killed. I believe that with all my heart.
All right, Andy Kroll, gun control, will this group, Democracy Initiative, will they be looking at that issue?
It doesn't look like they will as much. Obviously, some of the organizations are involved already in mobilizing members and educating members, because this is a really, sort of a hot button issue right now. An interesting thing that, or way that the NRA, the National Rifle Association, the big gun lobby, could come into play is that, in fact, the NRA has been one of the most vocal voices on letting more money come into elections and opposing laws, for instance, like the 2002 McCain-Feingold Act. The NRA actually had a staffer of theirs waiting on the steps of a courthouse for the moment that George W. Bush signed that law to file a legal challenge against it. That case ended up becoming McConnell versus FEC, which went to the Supreme Court, and McConnell lost. But the NRA has been active to bring this into this coalition. They have been active on one of these three central issues for the Democracy Initiative. And you could see the NRA's role in that come to light a bit more, especially with the NRA in the spotlight now with gun control and the proposals and these ads that the NRA is running against the president.
Danny in Louisiana, independent caller, you're on the air with Andy Kroll of Mother Jones Magazine.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. I've been, as of late, been watching satellite TV and have seen networks like Current TV and Link TV. And on there, I've been exposed to some information about how we got here, and going back to the 70s with the Koch brothers and the likes, and starting the American Heritage Foundation. So anyway, going beyond that, and it seems along the way, the Democrats also have blood on their hands and being involved in some of this, such as Bill Clinton signed NAFTA and GATT, and we can go on, and we don't have time for that. But do you think that the Democrats will ever seek the problem, since they do have blood on their hands and conspiring, and a lot of them were subject to these lobbyists? And I hope this can happen, but I really don't think so. And where we are now was a concerted effort to get us exactly to this point by a few very wealthy old men. Now, in the end, we have to ask ourselves a question: should anybody ever have enough wealth to buy the government? And number two, should these people have to take first responsibility for all the losses that the American people encountered, personal losses encountered because of their efforts to do this?
Okay. Andy Kroll.
Interesting point I want to pick out, especially at the beginning there that the caller made, and thanks for the call, which was talking about conservative efforts dating back to the 1970s. And really, you can draw a through line from that point to where we are today. Really, to draw it to the 2010 elections, when you had dyed-in-the-wool conservatives like Scott Walker in Wisconsin elected to office, John Kasich in Ohio, Rick Scott in Florida, and elsewhere, put in place a very kind of pure conservative agenda. 2010 was an eye-opening moment for the folks in this coalition. They really saw 2010 as the moment when, oh, you know, we've heard about the Kochs and we've heard about, you know, the Coors family or any number of the folks who are wealthy conservatives who have been sort of patrons of the movement for a long time. But this sort of smacked them in the face, and they're like, wow, this is what happens when this agenda sort of blooms at the state level and to a degree at the national level with the Tea Party folks who were elected to Congress. And they realized we have to have a concerted, coordinated effort, something like that, on our side. Because this has been generations in the building for them, and now they're kicking our butt. And we're on the defensive. We're trying to defend union rights. We're trying to defend health care, this and that. So I think that conservative movement with think tanks like Heritage, as the caller mentioned, and candidates, training schools, grassroots groups, that came to a head in the last few years. And I think that this coalition really is a way to start to push back in a concerted way against that.
All right, Margaret in Kennett, Missouri, Democratic caller.
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say something to the commentator who's commentating today. In the last section, the people were led to believe that Fast and Furious was started on the Obama administration. It was not. It was started on the Bush administration. And when Eric Holder came in and did find out about it, he shut the program down. Now, let me go on and say this. I am for Democrat Party organizing. I am ready and willing and ready to go because we do need to organize. We need to organize to get the truth out, to stop false lies that the Republicans put out and try to muddy the waters. I am for all of that, and I am proud to be a Democrat, and whatever Obama asks me to do, I am ready to get to it.
All right, Margaret. Andy Kroll.
I think Margaret needs to be getting those emails from the Obama administration for Organizing for America that you mentioned. She sounds like she's ready to go around this gun control reform that we're going to see. Interestingly as well, those are the kind of members, those are the kind of folks who, the coalition that I write about, they want their members to be as fired up as Margaret was because, they realize that in a Harvard study that came out just this week, made this point very well, that the big kinds of reforms these folks want on these three issues are not going to come from, they believe, sort of grand bargains here in Washington and the kind of closed-door internal negotiations, horse trading, getting a few key players around a table and saying, okay, how do we make this happen? They realize that big changes on money in politics, big changes on voting rights in America are really going to come from the outside, are really going to come from their members, whether they are members of the CWA union, whether they are Sierra Club members at the state level, whether they're members of the NAACP chapters around the country. They're the ones who are going to drive this real change.
At a state level.
Both at the state level and the national level. I mean, the head of the Sierra Club that I interviewed, Mike Brune, has already talked about mobilizing state chapters of the Sierra Club around these issues. But state, federal, even local levels, the pressure is going to have to come from folks like Margaret. It's going to have to come from energized members because they've realized, while they can meet and sort of plan, strategy and devise and create some goals, really the energy and the action is going to come from the outside.
This is Must Do Better 2012 on Twitter, who says, Americans don't like extremists. The Republicans are becoming more and more extreme. I'm wondering, though, is there a danger, or was there any talk of concern by these groups that they could go too far?
I think that that is in their head at all times. I mean, the organizations in this group obviously span from, all stripes and shades of the progressive movement. So there definitely are more liberal elements there, as well as folks who may be closer to left of center or center, relatively speaking, of course. There are no blue dog Democrats really in this group. But, I think they realize that, pragmatism is important as well, and that they want reforms on these three key issues, but they have also, it can't be a liberal wish list either. Now, I don't think that they believe that what they want is a liberal wish list. I think what they believe is that this is good and true for the country. But they go into this with eyes wide open. These are some of the most sort of savvy political operatives, leaders in Washington.
And Andy Kroll's talking about a meeting that took place with liberal groups who are now calling themselves Democracy Initiative. The headline in the Mother Jones magazine, the massive new liberal plan to remake American politics, their agenda, big money out of politics, voter ID laws, and reform the filibuster in the Senate. Mary, in Louisville, Kentucky, Republican caller, hi.
Good morning.
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 I know you've spoken about the fact that one of the parts of their agenda is big money in politics. I wonder what part of the discussion will entail the big union money in politics, especially in light of the fact that union dues are forced dues, and its members do not have a say in where their union dues go as far as lobbying goes. That it's rather ironic that big money in politics only refers to Republican money, and quite frankly, I'm really getting tired of that old argument.
Yeah, I mean it's a good point. I think that obviously unions, some of the biggest unions in the country, are a member of this coalition. The CWA helped start it, but SEIU, the Service Employees Union, is in it, as is the AFL-CIO. They believe that union money is not on par with Sheldon Adelson, who reportedly gave individually $150 million to Republican causes in the 2012 elections. Unions disclose the vast bulk of their spending and their lobbying to the Labor Department. So they really don't see themselves on the same part. Now they spend.
What about George Soros, though?
George Soros is not part of that. George Soros's money is not disclosed in the way that labor unions are. So there's a disparity there, without a doubt. And the foundation world is different from unions. The unions are a huge political force, and they are absolutely part of this equation. Now, whether this group talks about labor union money, it remains to be seen, because labor unions are a founding element of it, and they don't see themselves as part of this. But I don't think any discussion about money in politics is complete without talking about labor on the left. I mean, the labor, is really a huge funding source for the Democratic Party.
Just explain what you meant by massive new liberal plan. What's massive about it?
Never have we seen a coalition with, right now, 36 of really the largest groups on the progressive side, and it's expected to grow as big as 50. The membership is by basically the end of the winter, and that's coming from Mike Brune, who's the director of the Sierra Club. We've never really seen a coalition this big that has tackled 3 fundamental issues. We've seen organizations like Healthcare for America Now, which was a lot of different folks coming together, but it was around a specific legislative item, President Obama's health care bill. And in 2009, that's when HCAN, as it was called, was really big. But never have we seen this sort of concerted effort. And as Mike Brune of Sierra Club told me, and when he went to his board and said, I want your backing on this, he told them, this is a 10-year plan. This is not a 1-year, 2-year plan. This is not built around an election. This is not built around a piece of legislation. This is something we want to be here to stay. And 50 liberal organizations potentially working together for a decade on 3 really fundamental, 3 big picture, hugely contentious issues, as our last caller pointed out with money in politics alone. We just haven't seen that before. It's sort of unprecedented. And
the Sierra Club using money and resources to focus on something other than environmental legislation. Exactly, and that's what caught a lot of people off guard. Was, well, why does the NAACP want to talk about money in politics? They're not a campaign finance reform group. Why is the Sierra Club getting involved in voter ID and voting registration? That's not their bailiwick. They're a liberal, they're an environmental organization, but they see these fundamental issues as key to their own agendas. They can't get to their agenda if these things are blocking it. All right, Louisville, Kentucky. Mary's a Republican there. Hi, Mary. Good morning, Mary. You're on the air.
You already took my call.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. Jack in Lafayette, Louisiana, independent caller. Hi, Jack.
I've listened to your new names, progressive and now Democratic, and I'm wondering, would you call yourself a socialist?
Me personally? Absolutely not.
Okay, so your organization, you would say, is liberal, but you're not for more socialist type of legislation for quote unquote the people, or the ever growing socialists. And I wanted to ask you a question with this line of future growth and power that you want. Who do you think is going to pay for it? And why don't you call your organization a socialist organization?
Well, I think you might be conflating the organization that I'm writing about, the Democracy Initiative, which is this coalition of progressive groups, with my own publication, Mother Jones, which I don't know if anyone would call socialist, but these organizations believe they're putting their own money into this effort, I should add, and so the funding for this project, this campaign itself, comes from them. But the policies that they are supporting aren't they're not calling for healthcare reform. They're not calling for a massive expansion of government necessarily. They want tighter regulations on money in politics. They want more opportunities and more chances for folks to get on the voting rolls and to vote, and to also try to block what these groups see as discriminatory voter ID laws. And they want to reform the use of the filibuster in the Senate. And so I don't know if there's necessarily a plan for a massive expansion of government in there, even though these organizations have supported policies in the past that would call for more government spending.
Oversight of GOP on Twitter. Andy, don't they realize that while Republicans control the House, filibuster reform is pointless? Meanwhile, GOP is reforming on state laws.
Well, the state-national debate is a very good one. The filibuster reform is a fight in the Senate, and that can play out at the beginning of a new congressional term, which we are in right now. But with this state and federal question is a great one, because at the same time that the Obama folks have been so successful at the federal level with campaigning and raising money and so forth, we've seen the Republicans really enact large chunks of their agenda at the state level, and state Democrats have not had nearly as much success as national Democrats had, and whether this is from laws governing unions or eroding the power of unions, whether it is voter ID laws, whether it's blocking healthcare implementation. The conservative agenda has really been implemented at the state level, and Democrats are sort of on their heels trying to grapple with this.
Okay, Kermit in Florence, South Carolina, Democratic caller. Hi there.
Yeah, hi.
Good morning. What's your question or comment?
Yeah, my comment was on the freedom for prayer in schools and prayer at sports events and this kind of thing. Seems like they're worried more about but guns than worried about our freedom of speech. Schools and prayer at sports events and this kind of thing.
I think we kind of lost you there, caller. We'll move on to Brian in Illinois, Republican. Hi, Brian.
Hello. When you're talking about unions, I don't think any union should be involved in government. It should be completely private sector. And on another comment on guns, I lived in Chicago and I live around Peoria, Illinois, and 90% of the gun crimes are by black men killing people for the clothes they wear because they had the hat on sideways, color of shoes.
Brian, how do you know that figure?
How do I know that figure? Mm-hmm. Well, you can look at the records, the arrest records.
Okay.
It's that simple, and I guarantee not one of those guns are registered. Not one. So I just don't understand how they're going to do this and infringe on people's rights to carry a gun.
All right. Brian, I'm going to leave it at that point, because we're talking more broadly this morning with Andy Kroll about his piece in Mother Jones magazine about liberal groups coming together and trying to remake, they say, American politics with an agenda that includes big money out of politics, is what they say, voting ID laws, and reforming the filibuster in the Senate. We'll go to our next call in Kansas City, Missouri. Independent caller. What's your name, caller?
Ephraim.
Okay, go ahead.
I've been watching C-SPAN for a while, and I do appreciate you allowing me to get in and kind of sound off on this topic. we are indeed a nation of laws, but also we have to understand also too that the media cannot be complicit and not relaying to the people that we're also a nation of words, and we must not be so cavalier with the words that we use. When we use words like liberal plan, or we use words like conservative or Democrat, I think we must understand what we're trying to relate to the people. It's amazing to me how many people call in who are so uninformed, and it seems as though they divide themselves among party lines, and they don't seem to understand like basic concepts, like what a republic is, what a representative democracy is, so that when they work from the framework of First or Second Amendment or anything, any public discourse, to know exactly what it means. And I think that the media does a great disservice to the people in its reporting, because they don't explain things or correct people when they obviously go off on a tangent.
And caller, are you referring to this headline specifically, the new liberal plan to remake American politics?
Yes, absolutely. And when we speak of things that way, we have to understand that this is a republic. The Constitution is the law of the land, and anything not enumerated to the federal government goes back to the states. I heard a representative get on there and say something totally contrary to the Constitution. He said that federal law trumps state law. Well, he didn't explain exactly what he meant by that, so I'm thinking of comments like that. So Mr. Kroll, when he's on there, I wish he would go into more detail and explain to people, give a basis by which he makes his comment, versus just saying, well, this thing means that, or and not giving people a good understanding.
All right, understand your point. Andy Kroll.
Yeah, I appreciate the call. I believe that headlines can have the effect of summarizing and shrinking down into a few words what in this case is an incredibly diverse and wide-ranging coalition of organizations. I think they would identify largely as liberal. I think progressive is the word that they really like to use. They see themselves as sort of this patchwork of progressive groups. But they absolutely identify as left of center. But I also agree as well that we've got to be clear. I've got to be clear every day on what I mean by a liberal or a progressive. What exactly does this agenda stand for? What kind of belief system are they coming from? How does the spectrum back and forth work? And it's a challenge every day. But I think this organization this coalition absolutely falls on the left side of the political spectrum.
Hastings, Michigan. Daniel is watching us there. Democratic caller.
Yes, hi. I'd like to make a comment to the caller from Kentucky that talked about the unfair advantage of the PAC money, comparing it to the union dues money. Number one, it's against the law to take union dues money and use it for political action campaigns. That's a separate campaign that people can voluntarily join once they're in the union. But the union dues do not go for anything political. That's against the law. And I think people in this country think, oh, all these people are paying union dues, to take on the Republicans or, people in the party. But that's not true.
All right. Let's take the point. Andy Kroll?
Yeah, no, it's a good point as well. It's a good point as well. Union members have to say if they want money spent on political purposes, the dues that they pay go toward representing them, go toward negotiating contracts. This is sort of a nuance of the union money versus Republican money, conservative money debate, unfortunately, that gets lost. And these labor organizations are constantly in education mode, trying to remind people of the nuances here and of how these organizations actually work. And another thing to stress as well is that unions do disclose the vast majority of the money that they spend when it comes to lobbying, when it comes to politics. That information is with the Labor Department here in Washington. And so the disclosure critique of unions doesn't hold up quite as well as it might with a secretive nonprofit organization, as it might. You mentioned George Soros. Some of the money that he gives does not disclosed to the public as well. And so, but these distinctions have to be made, and we've got to kind of hold the line there.
We'll go to Jared next. Norman, Oklahoma, Republican caller.
Hi, thanks for C-SPAN.
Morning.
And I also wanted to thank the the guest you have. If I'm not mistaken, his organization posted the 47% video.
That's right.
Well, I thought that was definitely something the American public had a right to see. I wanted to thank you for that. But my call is in regards to this grassroots campaign. I feel like its work that it wants to do against gun control is a little bit in the nature of propaganda, because I feel like the entire side isn't being reported. You know, every single one of these shootings, or at least 90% of them, these kids who commit these atrocities have been on serious medications. And I really think that that's something that deserves to be dove into, because, you know, there's 80 million gun owners in America, and yet there's less than 1% of gun shooting deaths. There's 11,000 deaths in relation to firearms each year, and I think that it's borderline criminal to say that the problem is guns when 90% of these shootings involve antidepressant drugs. But yet, as we know, the medical industries and pharmaceutical drug companies are far too involved in politics to go after that.
All right, Jared. And Jared mentions these groups that are contributing to the debate for Democrats, for the president on gun control measures, and that's Organizing for America, which was not part of this meeting that you reported about, correct?
Yeah, Organizing for America is the Obama-connected organization that is going to try to mobilize folks who may have given to the president, who may have volunteered for the president, worked on his re-election in some large or small way. That is the organization that, from the sounds of this, is going to be putting out messages to its members and getting them to sort of put pressure on their lawmakers. You know, the caller, I can't speak to the veracity of the 90% statistic that he mentions, but the connection between guns and mental illness is something that has come up over and over again in this debate, something that the task force that Vice President Joe Biden said that they would look at as well. And it's definitely a very central piece of this gun control debate, this debate over guns in general that we're having.
And separately, these groups that gathered that you wrote about, just real quickly, a reminder to viewers, because Daryl Rich says, what exactly is this massive liberal plan? The three things that this group, Democracy Initiative, is focusing on are what?
They're focusing on big money in politics and ways to get that big money out. You know, super PACs that can take $1 million donations, nonprofit groups that take secret money and spend money almost secretly as well. That's one element of it. Voting rights and fighting voting ID laws, really trying to get more people onto the voting rolls while at the same time combating laws that these groups see as discriminating against students and seniors and minorities. And then the third piece is reforming the use of the filibuster in the Senate.
And all of those things would contribute to what, more liberal, progressive lawmakers? They
would. Yeah, I mean, the progressive agenda, they believe, is stymied by these three fundamental issues. When these organizations got together for the first time last June, it was a smaller group of them, but the core folks were there. They sat down and thought about, okay, we all have our own respective agendas, but what are the fundamental things that are both blocking card check unionization, which would make it easier for workers to join a union in the Senate and in the Congress, really. What blocked comprehensive environmental reform? What blocked reform of disclosing secret money in politics? And when they sort of broke it down, they realized that these three issues that they care about, that they're talking about now, these three issues are impediments to everything that they've been trying to do, and that's why they zeroed in on them.
Jim in Marietta, Ohio, independent caller.
Hi, I'm glad to be on your guys' show finally.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. My big question is with the card checks for the union, as more and more states push for right-to-work laws, shouldn't we just have a simple card check to get the unions more involved? Because for years they've been warning us about the rich. I mean, even going back to the movie A Christmas Carol, Ebenezer Scrooge said the surplus population, why don't they just go ahead and die? Isn't that pretty much what Mitt Romney said in his 47%? If you're not contributing to America, you just might as well be gone.
Andy Kroll.
The right to work and card check point is an interesting one. Right-to-work laws are spreading around the country. This is another example of that 40-year conservative agenda. Right-to-work was at the center of that, coming into place, being implemented by conservative governors around the country. I mean, it was implemented in Michigan, my home state, of all places, and sort of the cradle of American labor. Card check legislation would have made it easier for folks to join unions, but that was filibustered. That was blocked in the U.S. Congress as a whole, and that was a big impetus for the creation of this organization and for filibuster reform being there. I mean, the head of the Communication Workers for America, Larry Cohen, shakes his fist at the memory of card check legislation being blocked. That was a huge priority for organized labor in America, and to see it be blocked, it was really a wake-up call for them.
On our line for Democrats in Lindale, Texas, Philip.
Yes, Andy, number one, I would like to say thank you so very much for being on. It has exposed me, apparently, to the liberal ideas, and I feel like that you're going the right direction. I feel like that you could almost stick a fork in the Republicans because they're done. I truly believe that it's obvious now that they're for the rich and wealthy people, and we need more people that are trying to work for the middle class. I am below middle class and make ends meet from month to month, and if we were looking at what they were going to do and take this money away from us and increase our taxes by, mine would be about $2,000 a year, that is a big amount of money taken away from us just to protect the rich and the big companies. I appreciate your time. God bless America.
All right, Philip. Andy Kroll.
It's interesting. I've gotten emails and messages from folks after this story coming out. People, one, obviously not knowing that this organization existed. This is being Democrats and folks on the left, but also saying, I'm glad that these liberal organizations, these sort of stalwarts of the movement, are finally getting together and pooling their resources and trying to, build some kind of united effort after seeing, folks on the conservative side be so organized and so successful for so long. And people are sort of saying, well, thank you, how can I get involved? And I'm not quite sure what to tell them, maybe join some one of these organizations. But there definitely is a recognition on the left that there needs to be a sort of a counterbalance to what we've seen for so many years on the right. Jay in Goldsboro, North Carolina, a Republican caller.
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And what was bothering me is the approach that's being taken, that it should be in this country that the best ideas win. And it looks to me, it bothers me that this is a tyranny here.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that the folks that belong to the Democracy Initiative, this sort of coalition of progressive groups I'm writing about, I don't think that they would disagree with that idea as well, that the best idea should win, and they believe that the ideas that they're putting forward, the reforms that they are organizing around, raising money around, are the best ideas, that a senator should not be able to secretly put a hold on a piece of legislation as the filibuster currently works, and that a better idea would either to force that senator to be on the floor and speaking the entire time to maintain that hold, that block, or some other sort of curb on the use of it. But I don't think the best idea wins as anything these folks would disagree with. Raleigh, North Carolina, on our line for Democrats. Azella?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for taking my call. I'm 82 and retired now, but I belonged to a union for a long time. And the union I belonged to was not a Democratic union. It had Democrats, Republicans, unaffiliated, whoever. It was about work, not party. And it seems like to me everything I'm hearing is like, if you belong to a union, that means you're a Democrat and a liberal. And you disagree with that? I disagree with that.
Okay.
Because they're just, I don't know where they are, but there were Republicans in my union.
All right. Andy Kroll.
Thanks for your call. I still think that there are absolutely Republicans in labor unions today. And, you know, for a large swath of American history, unions were not considered cut from the Democratic cloth, were not considered fixtures of the Democratic Party. I think that as time has progressed, Democrats have come to believe that Republicans, at least the Republican leadership, Republican lawmakers, don't push and support the kinds of policies that labor unions believe are good for working people. And I think you have seen in the last 30 or 40 years, Democrats realize that, at least in the last 30 or 40 years, Democrats realize that the Democratic Party is the one that is going to speak for what they believe is right for working people, and that the Republican Party hasn't. And that's sort of the labor perspective.
James Ard on Twitter. Fighting voter ID laws is a losing battle. Most Americans understand what is behind the effort, voter fraud.
Voter fraud is a very contentious debate. We saw that play out in the 2012 elections. There is a whole school of thought, a whole movement saying that in-person voter fraud, people actually committing fraud at the polls, is a huge problem. There really is no evidence to back that up. Rick Hasson, an expert on this at the University of California, Irvine, wrote an entire book called The Voting Wars, in which he calls the voter fraud. It's that there really is no in-person voter fraud. And some of the best research that we've seen suggests that while voter ID laws may catch the isolated incidents of voter fraud, not in person but elsewhere around the country, that the aggregate effect is disenfranchising, essentially shutting out voters from the process. Do
these liberal groups that got together think that voter ID laws, that they resurface again? I mean, a lot of states already have them. So what's their effort going to be, to overturn those laws? Yeah, I mean, there could be legal challenges to those laws. I think that these organizations believe that voter ID laws will continue to be proposed in states where maybe they were struck down, maybe they failed in legislatures. This is a part of the conservative agenda, is voter ID laws, and there are whole organizations that are committed to trying to pass those laws at the state and national level, and these groups want to be there to challenge them in court, to challenge them where possible in legislatures, and to do whatever they can to stop those voter ID efforts. Let's hear from Philip next in Lewisburg, Ohio. Independent caller.
Yes, ma'am.
Morning, Philip. You're on the air.
Morning.
I would put forth that neither the Democrats nor the Republicans care about the common working man. The blue-collar and white-collar individual that goes to work every day to support his family and buy a house and strive for the American dream. They only care, both the Democrats and the Republicans only care about power and remaining in power. The Democrats seem to court the unions and large organizations such as the Sierra Club, while the Republicans court large companies for their donations. Both sides have mega millionaires on each side because they want power. They want to be able to control somebody, something. And anyone that would align themselves with either organization, the Democrats or the Republicans, is a damn fool. Thank you.
The caller's not wrong, pointing out how both Democrats and Republicans buy into the sort of the post-Citizens United political system that we have. They have their millionaires. President Obama's inauguration allowed corporate donations, which it did not in 2009. We're talking about here his first inauguration. So there is some truth. And you also have the academic Larry Bartels, who has done a lot of great research, pointing out that the priorities of folks in the Congress on the Democratic and Republican side are not necessarily aligned to the working class and are more aligned to the wealthy. And I think that the members of this coalition include labor unions, and they certainly care about working people, have to answer to working people. But there is definitely a complaint to be made when you're talking about big national parties and how the system really works today.
What's next for these groups? What will we see?
Yep. So right now, the filibuster reform fight is front and center on their agenda because with the way the Senate rules work, the best way to try to change how the filibuster works is to do it at the beginning of a new Congress. And so as the Congress waits to come back, potentially coming back on the 22nd or 23rd, the Senate, I should say, is the Senate.
Right.
They really have until then. They really have until next week to try to convince Harry Reid, the majority leader, to convince Mitch McConnell, the minority leader, to agree to some kind of filibuster reform changes. That's front and center for them. But they will continue to, more broadly speaking, they will continue to meet. They will continue to plan their strategy for 2013 and 2014 and find sort of the best states, for instance, where they can have victories on their issues. New York State is a great example. Governor Andrew Cuomo has indicated willingness for a big reform of money in politics laws in his state. And New York is right on the top of the agenda for these groups on their money in politics goal.
All right, Andy Kroll, Mother Jones Magazine, motherjones.com, to follow his reporting. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.